It's the Federal Funds Legislative Oversight Establishment, and it's my bill. So I'd like to turn the gavel over to Senator Ingebrigtsen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, welcome with the Senate File 1564. Please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. Senate File 1564 is a bill dealing, as I said, with the Federal Funds Legislative Oversight Establishment. And I do have the a delete all amendment, the A1, that I'd like to.
Senator Rosen, is the A1 been passed out, or is it online for everybody?
I would assume it's been posted and emailed.
Okay. Yes, it has, Senator, and
right.
You have a quorum for the record.
Okay. Just show that we do have a quorum. Senator Rosen, to your delete all amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The DE amendment basically provides greater legislative oversight to the appropriation of the federal funds. It requires all funds received for COVID-19 from the federal government dating back to March 1st of 2020. They must be spent by a direct appropriation by the legislature only. And this oversight would apply to all funds received after final enactment, as well as any funds that have been received on or after March 1st, 2020, that were not appropriated through direct or statutory appropriation. And the reason for that, it's on line 1.10 of the effective date, is that there is money coming back to the CRF fund. And to date, so far, we have $57.297 million that has come back to the Coronavirus Relief Fund. The House and the Senate have jointly agreed to, I believe, 26.67 million of that. That leaves a remainder of 30.68 million that has been captured, that can be captured by the legislature that is sitting in that fund. Otherwise, it is the departments or the governor who would have control over that. And Mr. Chair and members, I think it's very important to pass this piece of legislation. And it's not a direct assault on the governor or anything that is happening there. It is purely the fact that this is what the legislature does. We get together and 201 legislators debate the issues. We figure out the best appropriate way to use these funds and how to appropriate money ongoing. And it is our right to do that because we do represent the entire state. And we come to the table with different mindset, different suggestions, different attitudes, and it's a perfect scenario for doing this correctly. I do know that there are 9 states that have no authority over legislative authority, but for the remainder of the rest, there's some either advisory, conditional, joint, or binding authority on federal funds. And so I think we're headed in the right direction by making sure that the legislature does have control over these federal funds.
Senator Rosen, before we go for any further discussion, would you like to move your amendment first, or would you like
yes, I would like to move the A1 amendment, please. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Senator Rosen renews her motion to adopt the A1 amendment. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
The motion carried. Senator Rosen, your bill is in order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And because of that delete to everything amendment, it's pretty simple. Anything after March 1st of 2020 that comes back to the state that was used for COVID-19, and that's remaining back in that fund can be applied to this legislative authority, and anything ongoing, such as our $2.8 billion that we've just currently received for the ARP money funds, should have legislative oversight, and that's the crux of the bill. I ask for your support. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
So members, are there any questions about the delete all amendment to Senate File 1564? Staff will help me if I'm missing something here. Senator Marty.
Mr. Chair, are we going to have Commissioner Showalter speak to this, please?
Certainly we can. Thank you for that. I guess I didn't have the agenda, but Mr. Showalter, if you're there, I think you are. Please proceed.
I am, Mr. Chair.
And welcome. And welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate the chance to make some comments. I appreciate the opportunity. But for the record, my name is Jim Showalter, Commissioner of Minnesota Management and Budget. I recognize Chair Rosen's intent, and I just want to point out, just on a simple process perspective, that as cancellations from previous appropriations come back to the CRF, even under current law, they would need to be appropriated in order to go back out. So, language that, returned funds, they're going to come back into the appropriation, and you could have certain language to make sure that it cancels to the general fund, but in order to be respent, it would have to be appropriated again. I'm more concerned that there's a little bit other perhaps unintended consequences that I want to address, because the A1 amendment appears to put federal funding immediately on hold, so that it would extend to federal grants that have already received legislative review and spending authority through the LAC process. And I want to make sure that we're not unintentionally holding up money that's already been going out to schools or is about to go out to schools, so for a safe learning environment, or impacting so that students have a chance to catch up on learning loss, or testing, vaccination, and efforts, which are working off of those previous dollars. Obviously, those were appropriated through the LAC process and the LAC statute, and I'm not sure that this amendment actually doesn't override some of the authority that is already there. Obviously, I want to just put one other piece of context in Mr. Chair and members for the record, is that federal funds are really appropriated in most instances for very specific purposes. So there's not a lot of flexibility in those funds. And I think what's important here is not to complicate the legislative review process and halt the use of those federal funds. We want to make sure that we're not overriding obligations that are out there. So I just appreciate the opportunity to comment on this, Mr. Chair, members, and my team or myself are happy to address any questions that might come up.
Senator Rosen, comments?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I would like to peel back just a little farther what the commissioner's saying about money that's already been obligated. And I believe that the last paragraph, but perhaps we should turn to Mr. Bodern to explain that that were not spent, that last sentence, that were not spent pursuant to a director statutory appropriation prior to final enactment. I just want to clarify that we are not stopping. If you've already gone through the LAC process, those dollars would go out the door. And I want to make sure that we clarify that.
Appreciate it.
Welcome, Mr. Bodern. Please identify yourself and move forward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members. Tom Bodern with Senate Council, and I'll certainly defer to Mr. Nelman as well. This amendment is written very broadly, and it does indeed. This would pick up funds that have already made their way through the LAC process. The use of the word spent is deliberate. It's the very last step, obviously, in processing federal funds. And I think the concern was to take a very broad approach to that. So certainly that could be revisited, and we could find a way to rewrite it. But that's the way it works in its present form.
So, Mr. Bodern, are you saying that the way it is worded right now, because of its broad implication, it would capture money that has already been through the LAC process? Is that what you're saying? That's already.
Mr. Chairman and Senator Rosen, to the extent that those funds have not been spent, it would capture those funds. It would not undo any spending, seek to undo any spending that has already occurred.
Yes. Okay.
Okay. Mr. Showalter, any questions on that?
Mr. Chair, members, so if I'm understanding Mr. Bodnar correctly, obligations that already may have been entered would be affected by this. It's only whether it's been spent or not.
Mr. Bonner.
Mr. Chairman and members, that's correct. Again, it's the very last step in the process that's picked up here in order to take a very broad approach to help. I think the concern was funds that the legislature had not really been able to take any, as is always the case with federal funds. There is a statutory appropriation that takes effect before really any opportunity for the legislature to appropriate those funds. There is review by the LAC, but the LAC process does not appropriate those funds.
Right.
So this was drafted in a way, again, to pick up funds that would have gone through that process or have been in the process.
Okay, members.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, yes, we could ask Mr. Nauman if that is the intent that we wanted this bill, and somebody's got some pretty good feedback going on. Not sure who it is. Thank you.
Mr. Nauman.
Mr. Chair, Senator Rosen, to reflect what the intention is, it was our understanding that was the will of when the request was made for the amendment language, that was our understanding of what was being requested. So I think the amendment does in fact what was, I think the amendment reflects what the request was.
Senator Rosen.
To evaluate that again.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Nauman. This is an important bill to get a vote on the floor on Monday. We're going to work on this a little farther and make sure that the intent is correct. Because I do think it's important to look at the March 1st, 2020 and any funds that are coming back that have not been spent, that are sitting back in the CRF, we capture those. But I just want to make sure that we aren't, there is unintended consequences here. So
Madam Chair, or Mr. Chair and Senator Rosen, if I might, Mr. Bodnar and I have been just talking a little bit. If it's your intent to not capture those items that have already been through the LAC process and may have already been obligated, you could subtract spent on line 1.12 and replace it with obligated. So then you would be clearly picking up only those items that have not been obligated. And presumably the commissioner is not obligating funds before the LAC process has proceeded. So by default, I think that would mean that the LAC process would anything that has been through the LAC process and the commissioner is obligated, those funds would not be picked up.
Senator Rosen.
thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I would like to have some feedback from the committee on this.
I might, Mr. Bodnar, would you clarify that for the committee one more time? I know the two of you had conversations.
So, Mr. Chairman and members, the proposed change would be on line 1.12 of the A1 amendment, delete spent and insert obligated. And as Mr. Nauman said, if funds have been through the LAC process and have been obligated, they would not be affected by this language.
Members, any questions?
And Mr. Chair, I guess I'd like to get the commissioner's thoughts on that.
Commissioner Showalter.
Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, thank you. I think that is an improvement. Obviously, it still halts all of the work and activity that goes with anything that has already gone through the LAC process. So while it may not have been obligated or spent, even with that amendment, it does mean that any of the funds that have already been authorized and appropriated for activity would be frozen at this point for additional direct appropriations. And Budget Director Rayton might be able to sort of fill in the blanks a little bit more, Mr. Chair, if that's useful to you.
Ms. Rattan, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. I was just somewhat concerned about the term obligated. I know we've had some disagreement about that term in prior pieces of legislation. So I just want to caution that I don't think it's always that clear. So if the intent is to make it so that if it's been through the LAC process and been authorized through the LAC process, I think that's a different bar than the word obligated would suggest.
Mm-hmm. Mr.
Senator
Chair,
Rhodes.
I agree completely with State Director Rattan on that. And I think there needs to be some more work on this to get this right, because I would like it to be a bipartisan bill that has a level of common sense attached to it and responsibility. And so I'm not sure if I'm quite ready yet to change the word spent and figure it out, but I do know that we will be working on it when it comes to the floor. There's more than likely we'll have some amendment to adjust this and get this correct.
Okay, members, any questions? Seeing none, Senator Rosen, was that your final comments?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do feel this is very important bill to make sure that the stakes are high now. And the stakes have changed now that we have some direction from the Treasury Department about how to spend these dollars. And there is time for the legislature to enact their elected right to appropriate these funds. So with that, I would like to move that.
I'm sorry. Senator Marty's got his hand up.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Rosen, I agree with you that the legislature should be involved in all the budget process, including this large sum of money. I do have a lot of concerns about the way this is done. And I do think that part of it is that some of the money, the legislature is not very nimble in getting funds out when there is. And I also think that this is money that half the money is not even going to be here for another year. We have an entire new legislative session before then. And I do think that we should be working on this in a rational, careful way along with the administration. I'm not sure that this bill is the approach to do that, but I just wanted to make it clear that I very much want the legislature to be involved in this. And I think there's bipartisan agreement on that, but I also want to be careful about how we do it and that we don't gum up the works when the federal government's setting aside money for certain things and then the state ties it up. We've seen that happen before because of a legislative slow move on things, that it stops. Minnesota sometimes has been the last state to use, I think of the HAVA funds, the last state to implement use of funds that were supposed to be done on a timely basis. And so I think obviously a lot of this will be discussed in the next few days and next couple of months, but I also don't think our goal should be how fast can we spend the money. I think the goal should be, unlike the first two COVID relief packages from the federal government, this one is not only bigger, but it also is longer term. And the other one, some of them, they had to be spent within, the first one, I think had to be spent within 8 or 9 months. And this one, we've got 3.5 years to spend it. And those other ones were supposed to address the crisis of COVID as we were heading into it and so on. And now as we're trying to pull out of it, how do we make the state economy and the well-being of the public handle it best? So I think the main thing I'm concerned about is, well, two things. One is that we don't tie hands of the administration on funds that are needed to go out quickly. And we hope there's fewer of those now as the pandemic, we hope, is winding down. But the other one is that we take our time and do it in a thoughtful manner. And I'm not sure that this bill allows the urgent need when there is one, and And I think commitments from the administration to work with us might be a smarter way than try and push this bill through.
Senator Rosen, I don't want to take liberties and suggest anything on your behalf, but it sounds like Senator Marty's about 85% there. So I'm wondering if he would, give his input to you here in the next short little while, because it sounds like we're not too far off. Senator Pratt.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And, just wanted to thank Senator Rosen for bringing this bill. There are a lot of really good ideas out there on how to spend these funds. I've had several conversations with Senator Rosen, with our counterparts in the House. I floated some ideas by Senator Champion on how we can use the federal funds to get our economy back up and running and get Minnesotans back to work. And that only works when we do come together and collaborate. And when we've had that desire, we've been able to move very quickly. We've passed 2 small business grant programs. We passed changes to workers' compensation for our frontline workers. We've changed, we've extended unemployment during the deepest winter months when the construction season wasn't there. And we have just really been responsive and reactive. And I think what Senator Rosen is doing is setting that expectation that we do have to work collaboratively, that we do have to come together. And members, I think we've proven that in the face of a crisis, in the face of that this can happen. And I know I haven't always felt like the administration has been willing to do that collaboration. And I think it's wholly appropriate for us to reassert the role of the legislature in this position. So I'll trust you, Senator Marty, and Senator Rosen to work out the fine details. But I think this is a good place for us to be as a legislature and as a Senate. So thank you.
Thank you, Senator Pratt. Any other questions or comments, members? Sounds like we have a team working together here. So, Madam Chair, would you like to move your bill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do want to definitely respect and acknowledge the departments and the commissioner and state director concerns. And I appreciate the comments from Senator Marty, and I will be calling you Senator Marty. And Senator Pratt, thank you very much. But I just also want to point out how nimble and quick the legislature was back about a year ago when we first appropriated $25 million to the COVID-19 response. And then in the end, how quickly we spent $500 million to provide the governor the tools and the response dollars he needed to get it out there. So I do believe that we can be responsive. And as you said, Senator Marty, we have till the end of fiscal year, the end of the year, December 2024, to spend these money. I can't imagine that amount of time under one person's hands or department's hands of spending. That would be almost a revolt out there. This is what we do. The legislature needs to get to work. We need to, it may not be perfect, but at least we can say we're in a recovery mode now. We know how to do recovery. We can hopefully say we're out of the crisis mode, but when it comes to recovery, we have some really good ideas. So my pledge to you is to continue to work on this before it gets to the floor on Monday. I'm not guaranteeing it's going to be perfect or that I'm going to get your vote, Senator Marty, but I'm sure going to ask for it and we're sure going to work for it. So I know you have another comment, but with that out.
Senator Marty.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Senator Rosen. I mainly wanted to make clear Senator Ingebrigtsen was guessing I was about 85% in favor of this, and I don't think I'm that close. But I do. My point is that I think we do have an obligation to work on this, and with the administration. I think that by and large, the funds have been dealt with in a very responsible way, in a very quick and timely manner. And my concern is that we don't gum up the works in doing it, and that we don't assume that if we don't have this, that all of a sudden the administration is going to go out and try and ram things through in inappropriate ways or things that we wouldn't choose to do. I do think it's appropriate we discuss how we move forward with them, and I'll look forward to continued discussions with Senator Rosen and others.
Thank you, Senator Marty. And I do have this new technology here where that I have a piece of equipment here, calculator, that when you add material to it, it actually comes up with a percentage. And it's not been working totally right, so I may be a little bit high on that, but I appreciate that. I'll make sure we get a new battery put in it here or something, John. Thanks. Senator Franzen.
Thank you, Chair and Senator Rosen. And I do hope that we can find something that at the end is bipartisan, because I do want to make sure that we have a role in the future, and future legislators do as well when it comes to similar recovery efforts from the federal government. But I'd be curious, if you haven't already, but if you're going to do some more work, I'd be curious to know what other states are doing, and maybe some examples of how they came to spend those dollars, if it was completely with the executive branch, or was there a method like we have in Minnesota, and kind of having a better idea of was that done on a bipartisan level, because we do need to see how other states are treating this. We're not the only state grappling with this. We have a model. It might not be the perfect model for this situation. No one was ready for a pandemic, but at the same time, it'd be good to get some ideas from other states of how maybe NCSL, but I wish we had more time in committee to do that, because this was kind of rushed until we had the latest information from the federal government about how to spend, or what we can do, the guidance. And I'm sure more guidance will be coming throughout the months, quite frankly, if we have any experience from past proposals. So I would like to see some more, and maybe that doesn't have to come to the floor, but if you have something that members in this finance committee can have, that we'll be able to give you some feedback from now until Monday.
Thank you, Senator Franzen. And I've had the opportunity to have research look into something similar to this, and Mr. Nauman was, it was tremendously fast, and he has connections, and I'm sure that can probably happen. But Senator Rosen, any comments?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I do want to say Senate File 1564, before it was amended, we've been talking about the LAC process and revising that and getting that not as clunky, as that's how I term it, it's clunky. So that was back in March 1st when it was first introduced. It went through state gov. I do have a little bit of information. There are 9 states that have the executive has complete discretion over unanticipated federal funds received between the legislative sessions. Minnesota is in the advisory category, and there's 10 states there where a legislative board may provide advice during the interim, but lawmakers have no control over unanticipated federal funds. 13 states are conditional, where the lawmakers defer to the executive for some spending decisions between legislative sessions. Practice may vary depending on the source, purpose, or type of unanticipated federal funds received. There's 6 states where there's a joint agreement. Executive and legislative branch sit together on a board and during the interim and share the decision on spending these unanticipated federal funds. And then the binding is 12 states where the executive branch may receive but cannot spend unanticipated federal funds without prior authorization or subsequent legislative approval. So it's really all over the board. And I know a lot of states are already done with their legislative budgeting process. They're out. We are one of them that I think a lot of states will be looking at to see how we handle this ongoing.
Members, any other questions? Seeing none, Senator Rosen.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, members. Like I said, I pledge to continue to work on this. We'll have a good, lively debate on the floor. Senator Marty or anybody else who would like to help me with this, I do appreciate the time and attention. I'd like to move Senate File 1564 as amended, be recommended to pass and placed on general orders.
Members, please take off your cameras and whatnot, your cameras and your mute button. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Aye.
No.
The amendment, excuse me, the bill does prevail with more yeses than nos, best I could figure out. So it does, the motion does prevail and will be moved to the floor on general orders. Anything else before the committee, Senator Rosen?
No, Mr. Chair, that's it. We may have another finance hearing if something else comes up that needs to have some attention, but with that, our business is complete.
Very good. Members, we stand adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.